conversation, mostly because I get to say something that I don't get to say often in the pandemic, which is, it's easy. It's gonna be fine. So Lisa did, I think, the first annual meeting online in our diocese earlier this year, and then I did ours at St. Thomas's in Hamilton at the end of September. And we're both here to give a little some pointers and answer some questions. And Lisa has put together some resources that are available at the link that Meredith shared that are very helpful in helping to sort of wrap your heads and your arms around what the annual meeting online entails. But before we get into that, I'm really excited for Martha to give us the rundown on those things that we absolutely have to do to constitute an annual meeting, and how we need to tweak those things to be able to do them online. Martha, you want to take it away?
Sure. Hi, everybody. It's great that so many people have joined us this afternoon. I put together a little outline that's on the resource page. It's kind of boring, but it does walk through what's required for an annual meeting and sort of the do's and don'ts and what needs to be done and how to launch a virtual annual meeting, which, as Brooks said, is fairly easy. I guess the first question is, do we really have to have an annual meeting in this pandemic? Like, are you kidding me? The answer is yes, you do. That's one of the few things that's required by the religious corporation law in New York and by our diocesan canons. So the answer to that question is yes. So then the question is, okay, well, when do we have to have it? When can we have our annual meeting? And, maybe we missed having it this year. What do we do if we missed it? The answer to when are we supposed to have our annual meeting, you need to look in your certificate of incorporation and your parish records. The annual meeting is supposed to be held on the date designated in your parish's certificate of incorporation. So, if you are supposed to have it on the third Sunday in January, you're supposed to have it on the third Sunday in January. And so, can you change the date? Sure, you can change the date, but guess what? It takes more than a year to change the date. In order to officially change a date for the annual meeting, the vestry has to adopt a resolution that says, we want to change the date from the third Sunday in January to the second Sunday in March. And then that gets voted on at the annual meeting that you're going to have on the third Sunday in January. If it passes, it would take effect for the next year. So the following year, you could have your annual meeting on the second Sunday in March. So I know that there's some fear and trepidation out there about doing an annual meeting this year. And our advice is just do it. It's going to be fine. Brooks and Lisa will tell you it's going to be fine. It can even be fun. So, yeah, just I think, there may be a little more advanced preparation than some years, but it's not that difficult to arrange. So where are you going to do it? You're going to do it by Zoom. And how do you get on Zoom? How do you get to the place where you do an annual meeting on Zoom? Well, the vestry needs, first of all, everybody should be checking your bylaws to see what it says about what's involved in an annual meeting, whether you have any particular rules. I know some, and we'll get to this about voting, but some bylaws require written ballots. We can talk about all that. And I know everybody has their own unique situation, but basically to get to a Zoom annual meeting, you have the vestry pass a resolution that says, there may be times when it's not feasible or safe or possible to hold an annual meeting in person. So we have decided that when necessary, we will hold our annual meetings virtually. There's language in the outline that I provided that you can use. Just insert, says blank Episcopal Church, just insert your Episcopal Church, have the vestry pass that, and then you're good to go. Now, I know talking to Brooks, they also had, you also had the folks at the annual meeting vote on that too, right?
That's right. Basically, we had the vestry approve it at their meeting, and then at the annual meeting, before we did any other business other than announce the slate of candidates and call the meeting to order, we affirmed the resolution as an annual meeting body, which may have been overkill, but it also served to kind of name the weirdness at the outset for everybody that was in the meeting to say, we know this is unusual. This is what we're doing. So we sort of gave ourselves permission to then turn around and do the thing that we were going to do anyway.
I think it's actually a good idea. And everybody's on board. Everybody participated in making the decision and everybody's bought into it. So I think that's actually a really good idea. One of the things you're going to want to do, and this is practical, not legal, but talk with your vestries about what's the best way to reach the most people and to get the information out about doing your annual meeting virtually. Are people going to be able, do they have access to a computer or a phone where they can see what's going on? I know for some that's difficult, and that may be your biggest hurdle. But I think talking about it and talking to folks and seeing what's going to work for them, that's probably the best thing to do with that. Okay, so you've passed your resolution and you're going to have your annual meeting on whatever date it says in your certificate of incorporation. What do you do now? How do you provide notice? Well, typically it's always provided during the announcements in the service, right? For 2 weeks before the annual meeting. That's again provided in the religious corporations law. But I don't know if all of you are having services. If you're having services, just announce it as you would as if you were in person. If you're not having Zoom services or Facebook or something like that, then the religious corporations law says if there's no divine service being conducted, you need to post the notice of the annual meeting on the door of the church. Well, I mean, I guess I do that, but if nobody's going to the church, nobody's going to see it. So, also it's just a matter of getting the word out there. Email, call people, just so people know when it's happening. And then the recommendation is to have all the reports submitted in advance of the meeting so they can be posted online, because you may not want to read all the reports during a Zoom annual meeting. It might be more effective to have comments or questions directed to the reports that folks would have already have been able to read. And then
Door of the church, excuse me, Door of the Church has got a very ancient tradition. So
it does have a very ancient tradition, but yeah. I'm just, from a practical standpoint, if people aren't going to the church to see the church, to see it there, then we still need to get, from a practical standpoint, we need to get notice to people so that they know about it.
Got it.
But yeah, I think it's a good idea to put it on the church. I love that idea. So then you need to make arrangements for voting. And this is where our expert, Lisa Busby, comes in.
I don't know that I'm an expert, but I am an experiential learner. So what I did, and you'll find it in the link that Meredith posted, what I did was, when I did the training in August, was I created a step-by-step, this is what you need to do. And I took lots of screenshots so that you could either print it out or so you've got a paper copy, or put it alongside as you're setting it up, because there is some setup that you have to do in Zoom in order to make the polling work. And so the PDF that's with it, I think it's in a PDF format. You can go through that page by page and it will show you how to set it up. And a couple of things that as we were thinking through how to do it, one of the first challenges that we realized is, okay, so Mr. and Mrs. Smith sit at the computer and they're both logged in on one computer. And so how do they each cast a vote? So you'll see when we do a sample here in a little while, and in the PowerPoint, you can set it up so that you can have voter 1, voter 2, you can have voter 3 if you have 3 people that are going to be signed into one device to be able to do a poll. And if no one has used any polls, they're kind of fun. And what surprised me was that I was really nervous about it, because the church that I did the annual meeting with was really worried about it. And so we made a point of trying to have as much fun as we could, and they absolutely loved the polling. I don't know, the interactive piece of it, I'm not sure what it was, but they just loved it and thought it was great fun. And we have a sample. Meredith, are you ready to launch a sample so that we can try yet?
I can do that. Let me see. Lisa, the poll is launched, and you might not be able to see it because you're a co-host of the meeting. I'm not sure.
I can see it. I don't think I can vote, but if you'll see on the questions, you can pretend if you want that there's a second person logged in with you, and you just instruct people to answer just one question, you know, whether they're voter 1 or voter 2. And as everyone is voting, the other thing that we did when we certified the voters during our annual meeting was we asked everyone to put into the chat box their full name and whether or not they would be listed as voter 1 or voter 2, so that we could certify who was actually voting and have a sense of when the voting was complete, so that we could close it. And as you can see, well, I'm not sure what other people can see right now because I'm the co-host.
Can I jump in, Lisa, and say that some folks are saying they couldn't do voter 1 or voter 2, and I'm just responding, I bet that's because I didn't follow Lisa's instructions well enough.
Well, I don't know.
So don't do what I did.
Well, when we get everyone, so one of the things to note, if you aren't able to cast a vote, if you scroll down to the bottom, there should be a place at the bottom. You might have to scroll to the bottom to click submit. I'm sorry, I don't see the screen the way that everyone else does, so I'm not sure what everyone's seeing. But the other really neat thing about polling in Zoom is that after the meeting is over, it produces a poll report for you. So you can go back, you don't actually have to, you can announce it, you can when you close the poll, you can show everyone the results, but then you can go back and have a report that shows you who voted for what. And then you can do your tallies to make it more official. It looks to me like 50 people. Well, I guess they're still voting, so.
Lisa, when you're ready for me to end the sample poll, just let me know.
Okay. So somebody just typed in a question of how do people via phone vote? And Martha, do you want to speak to that so that it's legal and correct, or do you want me to say something about that?
I'm sorry, Lisa, what did you say?
Someone asked, how do people that have phoned into the Zoom meeting vote?
Yeah, and that's a difficult question. I mean, hopefully, how did you have to deal with that?
I did not, but I think that what we decided ahead of time for us was that if we knew that because I tend to know who's going to be calling in, that we could either email them or send them a written ballot so that they could send it in.
And they would be sending it in after the meeting?
Right.
Yeah, I'm anticipating some questions today about bylaws that require written ballots. And I think that unless the vestry wants to change those bylaws for purposes of a virtual meeting, and there may be some sensitivity about that, I think the way to do that would be to mail or email ballots to everybody, but you just have to make sure that everybody gets one and then has an opportunity to send it back. And you wouldn't know the results from the voting until, well into the next week. Because you can't vote until the meeting has been opened. So they could all have their ballots and then vote vote during the meeting, and then somehow either email them or mail them back to the church.
Meredith, do you want to go ahead and end the poll and share the results? So this is what people will see when you have finished voting. They'll be able to see, and then what you have to do is then go back and retally those votes. That's what the poll report is for. Because as you can see here, you have 23 plus 24 or plus 4. So you have 27 people who have voted yes to that question, that they like marshmallows in their hot cocoa. So so there is a little bit of math, unless you're going to require everyone to sign in with a different device, but not everyone has the ability to do that. So that was what we did to work around it, so that more than one person in the household could cast their vote.
I think that's a good idea, and I think because that's going to happen. So I think it's a very good idea. So Lisa, did you practice with polling with like your vestry or before you did the meeting?
We did not practice with the vestry. We did a fun question at the beginning for everyone to be able to give it a shot. And I don't remember what we asked in it, but we picked a fun question. And that also helped us to work out I can't figure out how to vote. I can't, I could vote, but then once I hit submit, then my spouse couldn't vote. And so we had an opportunity to sort of walk through again. If you follow I don't want to give too much step-by-step detail, only because it's all in the PowerPoint and I don't want to bore you with it. I want to give you an opportunity to ask questions, but it's really the setup is all step-by-step, and it's much easier than it sounds.
Artha, for St. Thomas's, we, every time that we announced that the annual meeting was coming up, starting those 2 weeks out, we had a sample poll for the entire congregation, whoever was gathered that Sunday. And we also did that with every group that met on Zoom in those 2 weeks leading up to the annual meeting. So like when we had Bible study, we did a sample poll. When we had vestry, we did a sample poll. We did a whole bunch of them, and every one of them was something goofy. Like one of the polls was select your favorite apostle, John, Paul, George, or Ringo. And things like that, so that folks were there was low pressure. My brain's kind of going to Harmon with Horseface, right? Was our clear winner. There was something in that made it light and less threatening. And then that way, by the time we got to the meeting, most people, not everybody, but most people had the chance to to practice and see what it felt like and see how non-threatening it was 3 or even 4 or 5 times.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. So, you know, I think about doing that. And, you know, there may be for some of the very small parishes, this Zoom, the polling may seem daunting. If you only have a few people who are going to attend your annual meeting, think about doing the raise hand feature or something else for voting so that you don't even have to figure out the polling. There's no reason you can't do that. So I'm sure there are a lot of questions about all this, and I'm seeing some of them.
I've been keeping track of the questions. If it would be helpful, I can run through them in kind of order.
Meredith, am I able to ask a question? Hi, Martha.
Hey, Ed, how are you?
Good. It's not one of the questions that's been posed, but you're all assuming that there's going to be an annual meeting via Zoom. And we at Christ Church in Binghamton are seriously thinking of postponing the annual meeting. So I have a couple of questions of the very learned attorney, vice-chancellor.
Stump the lawyer questions.
We're just not ready for an annual meeting, including we do Zoom services. We've had a number of glitches, including even last week. We have a small fraction of the parish joining in on Zoom. So to have what you're suggesting could be very chaotic. We're just not ready technologically, even though we do have a lot of good techies working. So the question I have is, and I don't see anything that prohibits it, with the vestry is meeting tonight. Our bylaws say the third Sunday in January. We're not going to change the annual meeting date, but we're going to be adding, assuming there's nothing that prohibits it, a little, in addition that says, except in cases where health and safety concerns, such as a pandemic and weather, require a meeting to be postponed. Do you see any prohibition in regard to postponing an annual meeting, not changing the date in the bylaws or in the certificate of incorporation?
Well, you know, Ed, as I read section 43 of the Religious Corporations Law, it states the annual election of a Protestant, it talks about annual election and special meetings. The annual election of a Protestant Episcopal parish hereinafter incorporated shall be held on the day ... designated in its certificate of incorporation. And I think we've always interpreted that or understood that to mean that having an annual meeting is mandatory, required by the Religious Corporations Law and required by our canons, which is Canon 5, subsection J1. So, you know,
As you're pausing, last year we had a snowstorm. We did not have it on the third Sunday. We had it a week or two later. So technically what you're saying is we couldn't even have a postponement because of weather. So anyway, I throw that out there because we don't want to do something that's prohibited. But on the other hand, we're just not ready for an annual meeting technologically and otherwise. We're going to have a small fraction, if any, whatever the fraction is, people participating by Zoom who want to participate. They don't have the technology themselves. They don't have computers, for example, many of them. So is the opinion of your legal opinion that we can't do it, or is permissible? We just don't want to do something that's prohibited.
My opinion, and I believe this is also the opinion of Jonathan Fellows, the chancellor, is that parishes are required to have annual meetings. I know that's the hard answer.
No. We're going to have an annual meeting, but it's just not going to be, at least right now, subject to our amendment. It's not going to be the third Sunday as in the bylaws. We're going to have one, but at least we're thinking of not having it at the third Sunday in January. So That's, so are you saying we can't postpone it if we amend our bylaws?
I'm saying that the religious corporations law tells us when the annual meeting is going to be. I mean, I don't think, the sky is not going to fall. And I've said this the whole time throughout this pandemic. At the end of all this, it's all going to be forgiven. If everybody's acting in their best intentions and trying to do the right thing, you could meet when you can meet and ratify it after the fact, I guess.
Right.
But-
That would be, that's my feeling as well. I agree with you.
All I can do is tell you what the religious corporations law is. So, but
Hey, Martha, can I just jump in and ask the question?
sure.
I think the language that you read in the religious corporation law, when it says shall be, that's, I think attorneys know that's a pretty strong language. Shall be is must. It's not like subject to a lot of interpretation. And I think what churches have to be very careful about is, would they have anybody that would object to really doing something differently? And if there is anybody that's going to potentially object to having it done something differently, whether the bylaws are quickly changed or whatever, I think that really would throw a wrench into the voting or the actual annual meeting. I mean, I know one time at St. Paul's, we had someone object to the floor and we had to change very quickly what we were going to do right there on the spot. So I think the shall be it is, someone dictating of what needs to happen.
No
Well,
question.
Shelby doesn't didn't anticipate a pandemic either.
It doesn't really matter. The legalese is what's important to that, not what potentially could happen. And I guess that, my thought is if you can't do it virtually, maybe there's a way to figure out, maybe you have a slate of potential vestry members and warden right now that you could announce in your church meeting so that everybody knows ahead, and then you can send that out ahead of time so that whoever can be there by Zoom or whatever, or phone. Maybe people can call in and be part of the meeting that way. And I know at St. Paul's, we have the potential for people to actually nominate individuals from the floor. So either though we have a slate, sometimes that does happen, although we're pretty unanimous. But I think you almost have, everybody's got to kind of think out of the box this year, for how is it that they can make it happen and have the most amount of participants.
Our bylaws do say that the vestry and warden holds over until there's a successor, and there's no successor until there's an annual meeting. So I think that's covered. But no, I'm sorry, I don't want to dominate, but this is meaning this portion of it. But it's an important question, and maybe others are thinking of postponing too.
Can I'd like to jump in. I'll be the bishopy one now. I really appreciate what you're saying, Ed, and I especially appreciate the challenge. And I know for quite a few of our parishes, internet capabilities and comfort levels are low, and people are tired, and we're going into a Christmas that's not quite what we want. And so there's a little bit of there's a lot of grief happening. And so I think people are hunkering down, especially, it's cold and snowing. But I think if we can, kind of do the right next thing here, it might be something that's really interesting. And I kind of want to take us back a bit to what Lisa was sharing a minute ago. Whether or not you do a Zoom vote or do a poll, there are ways to make this less onerous. One of the problems with annual meetings all the time is that they can be a bit dry. And even the best of ones, even in person, dare I say it, can be a little bit dry. But this year you do have an opportunity to do something new. And I understand, having had some issues with connectivity, we have a lot of folks on this call. I could call them out, but I won't. But to have support for your parishioners to get past technological hurdles. I've heard Martha say the answer to your question, Ed, which is, yeah, you need to have your annual meeting on the third weekend in January because that's when the law says to do it. And it's fairly clear. Yes, there are times when pandemic or snowstorms, but in this case, what I'm hearing also is that it's more about a concern that may not be stated. I'm hearing some unspoken concerns behind the questions. So I want to acknowledge those. I want to acknowledge strong personalities in parishes that are balking at this. I want to acknowledge people who are sad and grief-stricken. But how about we step back into more of a broader context. And in your specific case, Ed, or some others who may have questions, maybe we can set up a separate time from this Zoom to address those specific questions for your, in your particular parish, because there's a lot going on right now and it is very hard. And there's no doubt about that. Lisa and Brooks and Martha, I'm so grateful to you for being here and giving context and helping us with this. And so why don't we go ahead with the next thing, and then Ed, let's look back around with you later in a different context and see if we can't support and how to, what would be best for you and your folks. So Martha and Brooks, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you, Bishop. Yeah, I did want to say, I know we may not be able to get to everybody's individual questions today, but I'm happy to address all of the questions that folks have, after our meeting today, the individual questions. But we'll try to get to as much as we can.
Can I just 1 second to say just a little bit of a cheerleader kind of thing? And I don't know if this was Brooks's experience too, but I was really nervous and really afraid, and so were some of the parishioners. And so we had a lot of phone conversations ahead of time about how to help people and how to help them work through it. And some of the people who hadn't been attending church started attending the Zoom services after the annual meeting because they figured out it wasn't as scary as they thought that it was. So I just want to say that.
Lisa, I'll echo that. We had a similar experience. I had a couple of folks who were a little bit insecure with what the online presence would be like, and set aside some practice Zoom sign-ins. So not even as quote unquote advanced as the polling, but just how do you even get onto Zoom? Whether you're calling in on a phone, you can use a rotary phone to get on Zoom, or trying to sign in on your laptop or your iPad or whatever. We did a couple of practice rounds to help people sort of troubleshoot on their end. And by the time we got to the annual meeting, it sort of hit me halfway through the meeting. What I was nervous about was how to do the annual meeting on Zoom, but the annual meeting itself was exactly the same as every year. The content was the same. We did the same reports. We put together reports from different committees that were emailed and mailed out ahead of time. So we didn't have to spend a whole lot of time hearing somebody drone on about how, some piece of ministry that's kind of minuscule doesn't need the annual meeting's attention. We didn't have to hear that. It was in the report. So we just got the important things done. We had a little bit of fun. It wasn't 100% smooth, but I have never been to an annual meeting in person that was 100% smooth. Last year in 2019, St. Thomas's had our annual meeting, food brought in by an Italian place in town. They brought spaghetti and lasagna, and they delivered it 20 minutes early, perfect time, to a different church in town. And it wasn't until 15 minutes after we'd finished voting that the food finally made its way to St. Thomas's. And you know what? Our vestry still got elected. Our budget still got addressed. I got to say what I needed to say, and other folks got to speak up in the ways that they needed to. And this year, when we did the annual meeting, we didn't have to worry about catering. There are a handful of silver linings to this. Not to say that this is a good situation, but that the way that we do annual meetings, the way that y'all do annual meetings, with the exception of it being online, it's going to be how y'all do an annual meeting. And it's going to be fine.
Maybe it'll be better. Sorry.
I will say this year, the food actually ended up being a beautiful gift. I don't know that we would do this if we were having our annual meeting now, but in September, COVID cases were declining in the area, and our head of parish life was so sad that she didn't get to put on the big feast that she baked like 150 blueberry muffins, wearing a mask and gloves while she was baking. Then she individually wrapped them and left them in the parish hall for people to come and pick up. And then when we had our meeting, you could sort of stand there and hold up your muffin and say, look, we're all having our muffins together. There, even in that, there's opportunity for community to still kind of come up, in the ways that we're used to doing them.
So I don't know, where were we leaving off with? We've done the voting. I don't want to not have time for questions. So I don't know if folks want me to go through the rest sort of my outline. I'm happy to handle it anyway. One thing you do need to do, and you need to do this whether you're in a meeting in person or not, is make sure that the people who are voting are what are called qualified voters. And again, we're going back to our religious corporations law, and there's a specific definition for a qualified voter, which is someone of full age, belonging to the parish, baptized, regular attendance, and contributors to the support of the parish for at least 12 months prior to the meeting. So, I don't know if there's any more risk that you're having people vote who are not technically qualified voters at a Zoom meeting than at one in person. I'm not sure there is, but I do recommend reading that definition just as a caution to folks to so that they can satisfy themselves that they are qualified voters before they vote. I know, Lisa, you said you did that at your meeting, right?
We did, and the other thought that went along with that is my thought was if they were typing in voter 1, here's my name, that they were also sort of having to, put their name to that decision that they are a qualified voter. So
I think that's another really good reason for having people type their names in. There's no, one of the issues is who's going to come to the annual meeting if it's virtual. There's no requirement for a specific number of members of your parish to attend an annual meeting. A quorum is determined by 51% of the folks who show up. So if you have 30 people show up and 16 people vote in favor of something, it passes. Just a simple majority. Hopefully people will attend your Zoom meetings, but it's really, there's not a specific number or percentage that need to. Now, one of the things about starting the meeting, we're all used to the meeting being opened before the, 8 o'clock or 10 o'clock service on Sunday, right? So that the polls can be open for an hour before the meeting starts. Well, that probably is going to have to change a little bit. So what we're recommending is that you tell your parishioners what time you're going to open the Zoom meeting and open the poll, so that if they want to be on the Zoom meeting for some reason at that time, they can do that. But the polls are supposed to be open for at least an hour before voting. So again, that's required by our religious corporations law. Technically, the only thing that's really required by the religious corporations law at an annual meeting is electing wardens and vestry members. Now, fortunately, we've all have a tradition of having a rector's report, warden's report, financial report, reports from other commissioners, and then voting. I just encourage you to sort of follow the same kind of agenda that your parishioners are accustomed to seeing, but as Brooke said, maybe not reading all of the reports, having them online so that everybody can have read them in advance and then ask questions. I've seen a lot of comments in the chat, and I have a hard time multitasking with this, so just bear with me. But that are asking, if we vote by mail, do we leave the polls open and leave the meeting open? And I would say, yes, you do leave the meeting open until you've collected the ballots and tabulated them. And then then you could close the meeting, and you could tell folks when you're going to do that. You would then have a follow-up Zoom session, I guess, where you could announce the results of the votes. And maybe plan that in advance so people would know when that was supposed to be. So that's the nuts and bolts of annual meetings. When we were talking about this, Brooke said, you know, it's just a vestry meeting with more people. So, don't stress, but, we're here for any questions people have. And I know a lot of people have individual circumstances that lead to different questions. So thank you all for listening.
I want to thank Brooks and Lisa and Martha. It is 4:47, and I'm aware that these meetings are generally an hour. I think that there's probably a lot of specific questions that you may have about your particularity, your parish, what's happening for you, how might you do this, how might you not do that. I would like to suggest that if you have a question that's on your heart right now, go ahead and put it in the chat room, and we'll see if there's any that are something kind of simple and quick. I'd also like to suggest that if it would be helpful to you to have a follow-up meeting to answer more of your specific questions, that you email my guest Meredith in this case, or I don't know, Lisa or Brooks or Martha, if you want to be the recipients of those emails and set this up yourself. I wouldn't email me because we'll get to it in about July, but I would like for you to have help with them. With the answers, and yes, you may email anyone if I have questions later. Absolutely. I want to stress to you, not having an annual meeting is not one of your options, and having a perfect annual meeting is not one of your options. But you do get to have an engaging, faithful annual meeting. That is one of your options. As you may remember, some of our parishes have gotten into a lot of trouble, not with the incorporation laws even, but just not having an annual meeting is a lost opportunity to talk about your ministry as a parish and who you are, and to have an opportunity to really think about what it is you're doing. So perfection is not your goal, but having the annual meeting legally and appropriately is. And so I encourage that. Meredith says, if you can send emails to her with your unanswered questions, and she'll get, and then we will post a frequently asked question with other resources. And then her email is in the chat box, mksanderson at cnyepiscopal.org. If we have uncontested elections, can we still do a single transferable ballot, Martha?
Yes.
Perfect. That's any other questions like that one? That was great. That was.
And I've seen this question. Thank you, Bishop. Thank you very much. I don't mean to interrupt, but I've seen one question is, do unincorporated parishes have to have an annual meeting? Yes. Unincorporated parishes by our canons are required to have annual meeting. So it may not, you may escape the religious corporations law, but you don't escape our canons. So the answer to that is yes.
Yes. And regular vestry meetings and annual meetings. Those are absolutely essential regardless of your status or your particularity. Everyone gets to rejoice in the warm embrace of our canons. That's right. And Trula, ideas on how to handle requirement for all attending the meeting to sign in. Lisa or Martha Brooks?
Yeah, I was just typing out in the chat, just a little bit slow. I was thinking you could have everyone sign the chat box by entering their name, or Martha, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but you could also have everyone that's on the call be considered signed in, as they would have to sign into Zoom to be present and use their names from there. It would be helpful if you had couples or families on a call to list more than just the one person whose account it is. But that would be my suggestion. Martha, do you, or Lisa, do you all have other thoughts?
I think either of those would work fine. Yeah.
We had a secretary who isn't a member of the parish. So it was an easy in to say, so this is an opportunity for Sharon to put your name with your face, because she doesn't know who all of you are. So, or doesn't know how to spell your name. So.
Anything else? Unincorporated parishes, I think, Martha, you answered this question about the annual meeting, that unincorporated parishes still need to follow the same guidelines.
Yes, thank you, Bishop. Yep, our canons basically mirror the religious corporations law, but they also apply to unincorporated parishes. So it's the same rule. Yep.
And while we're talking about things that are the same and that parishes need to be doing, audits would come up at some point. And so either an internal audit, and there's guidelines about that. If you have trouble with either the expense or knowing how or what to do about an external audit, then please do contact Kathy Hobart or Meredith or Martha, and we'll make sure we get you situated with someone. But these are some of those housekeeping things that need to be done by every parish every year, that there be an audit done on your finances, and that be not done, that it be done by people in addition to the treasurer or the person writing checks. It's not balancing your checkbook. It really needs to follow the lines of an audit. And then I think, what is it, Martha, like 5 years or so, it's good to do an external audit. But we can help you with that and make sure that it's not too much of an out-of-pocket expense. But these are important things to do. We need only look back a couple of years to see why it's important that we have these things done. Can get very slippery very quickly. I would like to mail out the reports and ballots at the meeting. We could ask for a show of hands. Don't think anyone wants to join the vestry this year. Should be easy. Well, Nancy, I don't know. Maybe people are just clamoring to join your vestry, but you might have, too many. But anyway, are there any other sort of simpler questions? If you have a more complex question, like with Ed, and Ed, we'll just plan on getting back in touch with you about your situation. Bait and switch, we're in an easy year for 2021. Well, let's not count our chickens before they hatch. And let me say, well, I'd like to shift a little bit so that we can have a follow-up conversation. If you still have questions, we'll work on answering those. But with a few minutes left to me, I want to address something that is important, which is vaccines. I had the privilege last week with Meredith to attend a World Health Organization global. It was really lovely. Global conversation with the Anglican Communion together with bishops from around the world to talk with the World Health Organization about the vaccines that are being brought out globally. I had a lot of questions going into that meeting, and at some point they're having, I think it's 4 sessions, and we were at the second or third one. After the last session, they're going to be releasing their charts and everything to us. And so at that time, we'll make sure that all the parishes receive the information we saw from the World Health Organization, and that we put it on our website. But basically, the question that I think that was very helpful for all of us is that the vaccines have been tested appropriately. The reason it's so fast, there's a couple of reasons for that. One that's really interesting and compelling is that there has been research going on for SARS for years, ever since the last outbreak of SARS. They have been researching it. So those researchers already had data that could be shifted for this particular strain. And so that sped up the process. And then normally with vaccinations, funding is an issue. It takes a lot of money to move a vaccine through the stages of checking it out. I believe that the number, I remember, Meredith, was 11 billion or 11 billion, I believe, dollars came from America to some of these groups. A lot of money has been given to speed up the process. And one of the charts that I look forward to sharing with you and putting on our website showed how many months it normally takes and how the money and the attention shrunk that time down to a year. Did make it faster, but that the drugs that are being tested also have still been just as rigorous. That said, I understand that there's anxiety about vaccines. We also need to be smart about Bishop, I'm bad at numbers. We also, I'm pretty sure it was 11 billion, but when I say it, I think, really? But I'm pretty sure that was the number. It was a lot. That's exactly right. One thing about the vaccine, it will not be a one and done. The Pfizer vaccine, I believe, and then the Moderna, there's conversation about that it's at least 2, like more like the shot and then a booster shot. But even then, one of the things that is not yet known is how long antibodies last. It is likely to be at least like an annual flu shot where you get the vaccine repeatedly. It may be that it ends up being something that's every 6 months, but that's the place where there's still some, the vaccine though itself has been tested, and they're being very careful with it. Yes, the Pfizer vaccine has to be kept at -70 degrees. There's an issue with that, but they've been trying to figure out how to ship it in containers, and there's a lot of conversation about that. Yes, and Dolly Parton is a national treasure and is incredible in terms of philanthropy. So if you haven't seen Dolly's America, it's a podcast. This is a little brief commercial. If you haven't seen Dolly's America, the podcast, highly recommend it. It's one of the best podcasts I've ever listened to. In fact, I've now listened to it 3 times because I was so excited about it. I shared it with my husband, and then I shared it with my kids, and I didn't get tired of it. And I will tell you, I've always liked Dolly, but I've never been a super fan. But it's a great webcast or podcast. So with the vaccine, should you get it? Should you not get it? There's not a reason medically to be afraid of it. The rollout, there was a lot of conversation about how the rollout, they're trying to be good about the rollout. My biggest concern is very much that it be done well. There seems to be a lot of attention being given to that. There is, as you know from listening to the news, that healthcare workers, people in nursing homes, at-risk populations, there is a pecking order. They're trying to sort that out, but it will be unfolding. And so one of the things that I want to point out is you're going to need to help your parishioners understand that this is not going to be the way they're thinking. In February, it will not be that everybody's been vaccinated and we can have big concerts and go back to gathering in person. This is going to take time. They have to produce the vaccine, and so they're producing it as, you know, obviously quickly, but they think there's going to be enough for everyone. But because of the 2 shots that are necessary, and because of people's fear, and because of people, even if you get the vaccine, you need to still wear a mask. Even if you get the vaccine, we're still going to need to socially distance. People are not going to like this. And we're just going to have to be patient with each other and know that it's hard. And that what we all want is for someone to, you know, and shot phobia or no, to, to just be done with it. All of us kind of want to be done. But it's going to be a little bit trickier than that. And some people are very headstrong about thinking they don't have COVID and that it's a myth. People, I know quite a few people who are healthcare people who have worked with folks who have died of COVID thinking they didn't have COVID because COVID's a myth. It's very hard when people think stuff. So anyway, I wanted to share that with you about the vaccine. I want to forewarn you about talking with your folks and trying to calm folks down, and to talk about this scientifically and not emotionally, not politically, scientifically and medically, and to be as patient with each other as we can. I think it's hard. I will, Leon, and Jill, I have nothing about the phobias, but I'm not keen on needles either, but I actually, if I end up getting the shot before like a bunch of people, I suspect I'll be somewhere at the back of the line somewhere, but maybe I'm not. I'll take a picture of me getting the shot and post that and say, I've gotten the vaccine. I don't know about essential workers. I don't know that I'm called an essential worker. But we just have to, kind of walk. And yes, don't watch the news when you get tired, and do things that remind you of your humanity, and breathe. This is indeed a tough time, and tending to your soul is really important, and mind what you read. And can I just say, you want to get me upset, you start talking about doctorates and women. But I'll just put that out there as somebody who has a PhD. I have a master's. I have 2 masters. Well, I have 2 masters and 2 doctorates. One of them is honorary, and one of them I earned the hard way. And I'll leave that there. That has nothing to do with the political party. That has to do with respect and honor and integrity. And I think it's very cool to have an educator in the White House. So that I'm leaving with you there, because that did get my goat this week. I just thought, have we gotten to this point? Really? But it was also because I have read the Wall Street Journal for a number of years. And so now I don't have to do that anymore. But so those of you on this call, if there's questions or comments, you're welcome to always email me or call me. Please check in with Martha and Meredith and Brooks and Lisa, and be kind to yourself. God is God and loves you and loves all of us. The incarnation of Jesus will come in our midst in ways we don't know. I'm really looking forward to the pageant that Meredith has put together with the kids reading. I got to see her son say, "Glory to the Lord in the highest." So it's worth the price of admission just to see Max say that. It brings joy to the heart. But tend to your soul. Pray and know that God loves you. And let's remember who we are and have dignity about how we live our lives. So I'm grateful to all of you. Thank you to those of you who are wardens and vestry members for gathering with us. With that, please email questions, yes, to Meredith. The Lord be with you. Holy God, we have talked about many things, and you have been in our midst, and your love has been with us. We pray, Lord, that you would hold each of us in tender care as we go from this place. Help us, Lord, to speak words of integrity and honor for others. Help us to be people of the light in this world, incarnating the light we receive from you. And I pray, Lord, for those this day who are afraid and who are struggling. May you, in ways that are fun and whimsical and serious and soulful, nurture and offer compassion to all of us. As we go from this place, Lord, may we have hearts of fire with your love for our hurting world. In your name we pray. Amen. Blessings to all of you. Thank you very much. Blessings to you.